So we're continuing our mech reviews here, Battletech Tactica, building that checklist, looking at what the machine does well, what are some of the deficiencies, and tactically, how can we play it on the tabletop? How can we find that optimal role? And many of the mechs in Battletech are cross-functional. They have a primary role, whether it's light, medium, or heavy, but a diversity of weapon systems, different options that you can kind of plug and play. And some roles they admittedly do a little bit better than others, but you have choices. And then we have, in my terminology, support mechs. These are mechs that were built, sold, marketed, and on the tabletop literally fulfill a single role. You're essentially taking all your battle value and pouring it down this really narrow funnel to have a machine that does something really, really well. The Tactica, of course, with this is, can you pull it off on the tabletop? If you can, that hyper-focus works tremendously. But if you can't for a variety of reasons, or if your opponent can catch you flat-footed, so to speak, you're in a lot of trouble. So this mech, I always have trouble pronouncing it. I want to call it the Bombardier, but we're exploring the Bombardier. And this is a heightened support type mech, and in many ways an evolution of the archer/longbow. So we're going to jump right in and start with the weapon systems, because in Battletech, one of the questions to ask, you look and say, literally, what weapons does it carry? Then we look at armor and speed, but what weapons does it carry, first of all? Second, does it have enough heat sinks to reliably fire those weapons? Or are they going to have to be chained or sustained in how they operate? And then third, based on that, you get an idea of what it's going to do. How can you counter it? Or when it does it, how can you not be there? So the idea, starting with the archer, if we're looking at this in the tech level as a progression, the tech level of the archer is you have the 2 long-range missile 20 packs. Inner sphere that has the highest spread of missiles. You have the redundancy, tremendous ability to output on a mech chassis. You also have armor and medium lasers to make that happen. So while it's a support type role, if another unit engages the archer, or if it's part of an aggressive lance, it's got other stuff to do besides just shoot the missiles. We then go over to the longbow, and the longbow is admittedly one of my favorite mechs. I've got multiples. I try to play multiples. That's essentially saying we're going to tone down the lasers, we're going to strip off the armor, and we're going to add on 2 more 5-packs. So you've got 2 20-packs, 2 5-packs for that maximum saturation. The Bombardier looks and says, well, let's kind of take that a step forward. Further, what do we really gain with the 5-packs? They're 2 5-packs. It's not a single 10. What if we have 2 LRM 20-packs? For short-range work, we'll stick in a short-range missile 4-pack. At first, that seems a little weird, but you need something to drive off the light mechs. And then third, we'll put in some experimental type tech, an anti-missile system. So essentially, we have an extremely mobile long-range missile launcher. Now, frame this. If we take missile carriers, long-range missile carriers, stock long-range missile carrier, inner sphere, carries 3 20-packs. It's not on a turret. It's got paper-thin armor. It's a tread type vehicle. You don't want to be caught out in the open. If you're going to use long-range missile carriers out in the open with clear lanes of fire, you're not going to indirect, then you need an infantry screen, and in addition to that, you need something else attacking your opponent, so they're busy focusing on that. They're not busy blowing up your long-range missile carriers. Ideally, an LRM carrier wants to kind of hang back and hide somewhere behind a hill or a building and just be like 20, 40, 60 missiles. Next one, 20, 40, 60 missiles. And even with the modifier and the range, you're just soaking everything. The challenge here is often, once you're locked in with the missile carriers, they kind of want to stay where they are. You don't have that mobility. With this mech, you have the firepower of those 220 packs, and you have the mobility of it moving. So it's looking to essentially create a missile artillery type mech, but give it massive mobility, give it good armor, excellent armor, and take away the deficiencies of vehicles in terms of motive hits and getting kind of chewed up or not being able to redeploy. So let's look at that. That's the primary role. And of course, you're going to indirect fire, you're going to direct fire. Tactica will follow in a second. I want to cover the other 2 aspects. You have that short-range missile pack. You're not engaging like a Warhammer or a Marauder. You're not. That's to drive off pesky hover vehicles or to drive off light mechs, where you're also firing the long-range missiles, but if they try to get under your minimums or close to those minimums, you're going to hit them with the short-range missile packs. It's something. Could it be something else? Could it be stripped off? I understand what they were trying to do. Maybe you'd be better off with a medium laser, but that's the component there. Now we get to something that's really, really interesting, because right now, essentially we're saying, well, Fritz, could do that with an archer. And you're not really losing that much. But the focus here, and you could say you're gaining stuff with the lasers, the focus here is the anti-missile system. What this means is that when your opponent shoots and you roll for the spread of missiles, it's at a -4. Think of like a chain gun, a Gatling gun, a rapid fire type rotary gun, some sort of whatever passes for the inner sphere tech, where you are shooting down incoming missiles. So this gets really, really interesting in that tactically, this mech, if you can park it somewhere, and you can indirect your opponent, often what they only have in return is reliably indirect. Well, if they're reliably indirecting fire back at you, you've got that anti-missile system. They've got a hit, they've got the modifiers, and that makes this mech very, very hard to hit indirect. So in city tech games, the ability to hunker down, pelt indirect, then your opponent will shoot back indirect. They're not going to do that well. When they send other mechs to hunt you down, you just get the heck out of there. And having the mobility means as you're redeploying, you're running and gunning. You're shooting missiles. That entire time, you are just blasting missiles. As part of a lance, it can be used to figure out the approach. So on the way in, right, your lance is working together. It's moving into the target to engage or capture mission objectives. And as it's moving, you're just firing missiles. At some point, based on the terrain and as you get close, then this mech doesn't have to, but it could start to drop off. And it could now drop off and hide and indirect and continue to lay down that firepower. Or if it's continuing with the lance, in the beginning, it leads from the front. If we're going to be aggressive with it, this mech leads from the front. You've got your lance, I don't know, you're like, 15, 20, 30 hexes away. You're moving forward with this mech. As soon as you're in range, long-range missiles, you start shooting. Well, if you're in range, then I'm in range. You're going to shoot back with your long-range missiles at me, even if you have 2 or 3. Maybe you've got an archer and a longbow in your lance, or 2 archers, or an Atlas and an archer. You're shooting long-range missiles at me. I'm shooting at you. I've got that anti-missile system. I'm going to shoot down most of your stuff. So I've got like free bonus shots. And then as we get closer and close the distance, now the mech drops back a little bit, and your other lance mates, maybe that Centurion, that Stalker, that Battlemaster, they begin to push forward. So a hyper-focused mech that you need to kind of figure out how to use. Now, the difference also between the longbow, you got the hands, you could punch. It's got a little bit more kind of danger close aspect to it if it gets caught there. But being hyper-specialized, being hyper-focused means you find yourself in an alley staring down a Warhammer. That's a different story. That's a different story. And tactically, if I'm going up against this mech, that's where I want to try and be, and that's where I want to try and go.